Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. Now, this is a pre-recorded session this week as I am traveling, but if you do have any questions, if you're joining on Zoom, just reply to the email, the confirmation email you got when you registered, and we'll get to those questions. If you're watching on YouTube, just feel free to leave a comment and we'll get to those. And same thing with Facebook, just leave a comment and we'll get to those. So my name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's national diagnostic technical trainers. Been in the training department the last 11 years or so, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple of years as a diagnostic sales rep with Snap-on. So I had about 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced, in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. And before that, it was 8 years at Subaru and worked there. And over time, I guess, just became the default diag guy in the shops. I always ended up with the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into my day. And before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today is continuing and actually finishing, should I say, our OEM specific training series. So the last make that we're going to cover in this series before moving on to something else is going to be Subaru. Now, if you heard my intro or know anything about my history, I did work for Subaru for a while. So lots of interesting stuff that goes on with Subarus. I don't know if it's really that out of the ordinary, but I know that they do a lot of things very differently than other manufacturers. So let's get through it. First off, the history, right? Got to start at the beginning. So Subaru, by and large, began in 1915 by Chikuhei Nakajima, and I may have pronounced that wrong. It's Fuji Heavy Industries, though. Fuji Heavy Industries was the parent company, and they're an aircraft research firm to begin with. So Subaru started off as planes. In the 1930s, they began making planes for Japan through World War II as Nakajima Aircraft Company. After World War II, of course, things had to disperse, and then eventually, after a while, they started merging again. So after some mergers in the 50s, they made their first car, the 1500, which is pictured over here, in 1954. Nissan acquired a 20% stake in the company in 1968, and Subaru does share vehicle components with Nissan, even still to this day, as far as I know, because you could go and replace a window switch and it would say Nissan on it, or a relay and it would say Nissan on it, right? So they do share some vehicle components, some transmissions back and forth as well. I know they used a 4-speed automatic out of a Subaru in some Nissans. So that partnership was still together, and then Nissan sold some of their stake to GM in 1999. So GM's ownership of that led to what we like to call the Subaru, right? So it was a Saab, but it was a Subaru underneath. So it's the Saab 92X and the 92X Aero, which would be a WRX. So it's an Impreza with different front and rear body panels. That's really all it is. The same drivetrain, same suspension, same everything. So it's funny, we had a Saab dealer in town, and we had, of course, I worked at the dealership, the Subaru dealership, and people would come to the Subaru dealership to buy parts for their Saabs because they were cheaper. It's just that different markup, right? Eventually, Toyota did acquire GM stake in 2005, and that led to Toyota manufacturing Camrys at Subaru's Indiana plant. So Subaru has a plant where they make Legacies and Outbacks, and that is in Indiana, and they have another line that runs Camrys. And you may have noticed over the last 5-10 years that a Camry looks very similar to a Subaru Legacy in many ways. So a lot of partnership there. It also led to that joint project of the Subaru BRZ, the Scion FRS, or the Toyota 86. All of them basically the same, just different badges on them. And they used a Subaru drivetrain, but it's the only drivetrain that is not all-wheel drive that Subaru makes. They also introduced their EyeSight ADAS system in the 2013 model year in North America. It had been around for a couple more years prior to that in Japan, but as far as North America is concerned, 2013 model year. First time getting that EyeSight dual camera ADAS system. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So as far as sales, the top models for Subaru, number one is the Forester, 1.7 million over the last 10 years or so. The Outback is close behind, 1.7 million again on those. And then the XV, which you also may know as the Crosstrek. So it depends on where you are in the world, for one thing. They could still call it an XV outside of North America. But originally it was the XV Crosstrek or the Crosstrek XV. I don't remember which way it went, but they just renamed it a few years ago to just the Crosstrek. But still, that's the same vehicle. And then, of course, we can see all the way down here Impreza Legacy, etc., all the way down to the Solterra, which is their electric one, and the Tribeca, which probably was only for sale for a couple years there until they went to the Ascent. So that kind of skews that number a little bit, but 6 million vehicles over 10 years is not too bad at all. So some representatives, since the number one vehicle was the Forester, 2019 was the high water mark for that over that 10-year period. And this Forester was the 5th generation of Forester. The only option for an engine was a 2.5-liter direct injection gas engine, and that was only in North America. CVT transmission only as well. 2017 Outback, also the 5th generation of the Outback versus the 5th generation of the Forester. It was available with 2.5-liter and 3.6-liter gas engines, so that would be a 6-cylinder. And it was available with CVT or a 6-speed manual transmission back then. So Subaru, one of the very few automakers that still makes a fair number of cars with manual transmissions. Like this 2022 Crosstrek was available with that. So it was the 2nd generation of the Crosstrek. 2-liter and 2.5-liter gas engines available. Also a 2-liter plug-in hybrid was available. CVT and 6-speed manual transmissions on offer for that. Some common issues. Now, pretty well known if it's a Subaru that head gasket's probably going to leak at some point, right? You're going to get some sort of something going on with the head gasket, and that's usually one of the main things. Misfires as well. The head gaskets, I really think, I'm not sure if they're ever going to figure that out. And the reason being because they're trying to fight gravity, right? They got coolant and oil going across, and then the gasket surface is right there. So they're just trying to fight that gravity going through and seeping through. Now, I will say, at the dealership, we did figure out a good way to keep them from coming back leaking again. So they might leak the first time from the factory, but after we were done, we would the way we did it, we never had them come back. And we were there, some of those people were there for over 20 years and they never had them come back for a leak. So I would normally put this in the tips from the text section, but since we're here and talking about it, so here's the deal. Here's what you do. And this is on the non-chain drive ones. I'm not sure if it would cross over to the newer chain drive ones, but on the ones with the timing belt, what you would do is you would spray the high tack, the red high tack on it, either side. And then you would torque it down, not necessarily following the torque procedure from Subaru, because that sometimes would lead to leaks. So you just go around in the correct order for the bolts, 25 foot-pounds, 50 foot-pounds, 75 foot-pounds, ship it. Have a nice day. And we did a ton of head gaskets because obviously that's a big thing. So we would do that and they would never come back with another head gasket leak for 100,000, 200,000 miles. So I guess it probably worked. So your mileage may vary. That's just something we did in the shop, but seemed to work for us. Anyways, next one is ABS module issues. Now, I found this doing the research for this particular topic because there's some codes that popped up on the top of the list for certain generations of those ABS modules, and they would just be is very widespread with that. And then oil consumption. Oil consumption, I think, is fairly common across the industry nowadays, but I know I own a Subaru and I have a terrible problem with oil consumption. There's a lot of other people out there that I've talked to and seen on the on forums and stuff that, yep, oil consumption is definitely a problem. And that brings me to this bulletin that Subaru put out. And some engine oil will always be consumed as part of normal engine operation. Okay, fair enough. How much and when it's consumed varies according to manufacturer's tolerance, wear, and vehicle usage patterns, with extended service intervals commonly used for days engines. Combined with one or more of the conditions listed below, typical engine oil consumption may require adding engine oil between scheduled maintenance intervals. When the engine is new within break-in period, engine oil is being of lower quality, or I'm using incorrect oil viscosity. I don't know. They say oil consumption under these conditions, though, may be as high as 1 quart per 1,200 miles. And when I was at the dealership, they always said a quart in 1,000 miles is normal. They would say that's normal. Now, if you got a 6.5 quart pan, and the oil change interval is 6,000 miles, I'm going to be a little low, but I'm going to be a little negative by the time it comes time for my oil change, right? So if I'm doing 1,200 miles, according to 1,000 miles. So you always got to keep an eye on that, and it seems like it's through the rings or however it goes, but it just goes somewhere out the back. So all right, some common codes we have in here. So like I said, top 9 out of 10 codes all have to do with the ABS module, and it's almost always this ECM communications circuit code, this 0057 code. There's a couple of VDC interruptions for engine convenience, so that's a slightly different reasoning, and that's for an Impreza or a Crosstrek, which is basically an Impreza with a lift kit. So across the board, a lot of ECM communication problems with C0057, and then a CAT code down here, catalyst efficiency, and that was very common for that era, 2009. Very, very common for CATs. I don't know if they've gotten any better since, but yeah, up till 2010 when I was still there, 2011. CATs all day, every day. So some OEM specific features. Now, Subaru is well known. They're not the only manufacturer that does it, but they are very well known for exclusively using a boxer engine. So that is the fire side to side, right? So I got two. If it's a 4-cylinder, I got 2 cylinders on either side. If it's a 6-cylinder, I got 3 cylinders on either side. Now, Porsche does it too, but I don't know if they're necessarily. This is like Subaru's calling card, right? It's the boxer engine. So 2-liter and 2.5-liter. That's the chain drive ones. And then we have the belt-driven one, that's the turbo one, and then 3.6 liters, the flat 6. This one's kind of a bear to take apart because there's a lot of bolts going on. Actually, the chain drive 4-cylinders are not that great anymore either. But that's really what they're known for. And the other thing they're very well known for is symmetrical all-wheel drive. That is their other calling card. So that's since the 90s, I believe 92 on a Legacy, they came out with a symmetrical all-wheel drive system. And how it differs from other all-wheel drive systems on the market is the first word. It's symmetrical. So since they have that boxer engine, they can have it low center of gravity and centered in the engine bay, and it's a straight shot out the back, and then they just run shafts off the sides. So the front 2 shafts are the same length. The rear 2 shafts are the same length, so that way it's symmetrical on either side of the vehicle. That way it allows them to direct the power to each wheel, and we don't have to worry about compensating for any different links in CV axles or anything like that. It's all the same side to side and then front to back. So that's another thing that they're very well known for. Another thing is they have one of the better ADAS systems in the industry, and it focuses on this eyesight system I talked about a little bit earlier. So what they do versus anybody else that I've seen on the market, maybe there's another one out there now that I haven't seen, but as far as I know, they were first to market for sure. They have dual cameras. Now, having a stereoscopic camera is what you would call that. That allows for depth perception because they can do calculations based on, like, you have 2 eyes, you get depth perception. You close one eye, you don't have so good depth perception. So same thing, if I'm using 2 cameras, I can calculate depth and distance just with the camera. I don't necessarily need other components to the ADAS system. And it works pretty well. They have in recent times added a third camera in the middle, and that's more for like traffic sign recognition and things like that. So it does work pretty well. There are some tricks to get into the system to recalibrate it, but that is one of the other things that it's known for is their safety systems based on that eyesight. So some tips for a tech. This first one we found over, I don't know, definitely a decent period of time. We kept having vehicles come in with misfires, and they would misfire on the same cylinder and it would stick to the same cylinder no matter what you really did. So one day I had one up in the air, and I decided, well, let's pull the exhaust and see if we got any problems with the valves train. You can look right up and see the valves. And sure enough, on this one vehicle that had a misfire on one of the cylinders, whatever it was just stuck to that cylinder. Plugs, coils, didn't matter. Ended up the valve guide had fallen. So this was an issue probably about 05 to 2010 at least. On some Outbacks, they actually had a bulletin where you would have to stake the the valve guides in order to keep them in. But I would see this problem all the time. The valve guides would fall out, and they'd fall out so far where the valve couldn't close properly. Now over here is what it's supposed to look like. Now sometimes you could have a vehicle that you suspect had a drop valve, but it looked like this over here. Well, guess what? There's another way you could figure this out too, because the bottom part of the valve, pretty much all the way down to here, where this would fall out, would be wiped clean. And then down below it would be, not clean. So if you saw this and it was back here, because sometimes they'd go back in, it was bizarre. So it'd fall out, and then sometimes they'd get themselves pushed back in. Depends on the expansion rate of the different metals, is my theory, anyways. But the valve would be wiped clean, so that's how you would also know that, hey, maybe it had fallen out and it got pushed back. Sometimes you could see just a little bit of extra. Maybe it's pushed out just maybe a hair more, maybe another millimeter. That way you would also know. So it's pretty easy to drop the front exhaust on these. It's like 6 bolts and then the mid pipe. So you can easily do it in like 20 minutes. You can take a look and see if everything else checks out and you suspect that it might be a problem, then that is a good solution for that. Another thing that we would always do, like I said, we had a ton of cat codes. So this tip can actually, and I've told this tip before too, but this tip can actually be used across many different vehicles, not just Subarus. But this was one thing that they taught us through a bulletin at Subaru in order to diagnose a cat and whether or not the cat was actually bad. So what you need to do is you need to look at your rear O2 sensor voltage, AF sensor voltage. You want to watch throttle angle and vehicle speed. So what you need to do is drive the vehicle at a steady state, 45, 50 miles an hour for a couple minutes, just so you have enough data capture where you can take a look and see at that back oxygen sensor. I also wanted to look at throttle input because you want to keep a steady throttle angle this whole time, and I'm looking at vehicle speed because you want to keep a steady vehicle speed. So once I see this fairly straight vehicle speed, this fairly level throttle input, my front AF sensor looks good, and my back oxygen sensor looks good in this case because it should be reading on the high side, and that indicates that your cat is good. If it's nice and level, nice and flat, you're driving at a steady speed, it should be level. If it's going up and down wildly, or it's following what the AF sensor is doing, then you know that that cat's not working. Because if it's going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, that indicates the cat is not catalyzing as it's supposed to. So you should, under normal operations, see a flat line in the rear O2 sensor when you do this. And like I said, it works for most cars with a zirconia sensor in the back. Another thing they would have us do during this test is over here. So you want to lift at the end of that. Just do a full lift. So it should go full lean when that happens, right? It's going to go to fuel cut. So I should see my front AF sensor go lean before my rear sensor goes lean. If I don't see that, then I know I have, and the front one goes after the back one, then I know I got a lazy front sensor. And then we can see where they kind of go over there. So that's just that's another tip. Like I said, we learned that through a bulletin at Subaru, and then we can apply that to many other vehicles out in the world. So let's talk about some OEM specific scan tool functions. So as far as the simulator is concerned, I'm really not going to be able to show you too much when I go into the actual scan tool, because you actually have to be hooked up to a car to see the functional test load. It's kind of one of those other weird things that Subaru does, that the way their ECUs work, kind of wild. But there are a few different things that I picked out. It's alternator control, because they have a variable output alternator on some of the newer ones, so you can control it up or down. EGR control, so this is where you can open it certain percentage to open the EGR valve, and then injection quantity control to change the amount of injection, fuel injection quantity, just for diagnostic purposes. So here's an example of what that would be: plus 20% to minus 13% in steps in between. So that's interesting and unique. I've never seen it really function that way before. ADAS related tests, like I said, ADAS is pretty big on those, and camera all adjustment mode. So there is a replacement or removal for the camera, and front and rear radar calibrations. Now, in order to get into the camera, there's actually this camera adjustment help article, so you wouldn't need to click on that. But basically what that says is there are 2 buttons on the top by the map lights. You need to hold those up before you enter into that module, and then that will allow this functional test to appear. Otherwise, it will not appear. So that's just kind of like a lock or security function in order to keep people from accidentally going in there and hitting it when they don't need to. Also, front and rear radar calibrations, if I haven't said that. Other tests, ABS sequence control mode, that is important for when I do any ABS work. Like we said, the ABS module might have a problem on some of these. So what that does is it bleeds the internal valves and accumulators in there. So that's important. You hold down the brake pedal and it goes through the different valves and bleeds the air out. And then brake pad maintenance mode, which is important on any vehicle with electronic parking brakes. The newer style electronic parking brakes on a Subaru are a caliper actuated one, so you do need to put it in maintenance mode if you're going to do any work on the rear brakes. All right, so let's go live on the tool, and then we will see what we can see as far as, like I said, not a lot we can see in the simulator, but there is plenty we can see on SureTrack information. So let's do that. All right, so we have our first car up here. It's the 2019 Forester we looked at. Now, if we go into Scanner, like I said, in the simulator that I use, it doesn't show any functional tests in most of the modules, but I know in ABS we can. So if we go in there and we see the functional test, there's that sequence control mode I talked about a little bit earlier. So that is where it bleeds the internal inside the hydraulic unit for the ABS. VDC check mode is for the vehicle dynamics control. That's like their stability control, what they call it. And then VDC sensor midpoint setting mode. That's like setting the yaw sensor to its its base setting if you ever have to replace that. A couple other things, eyesight, like I said, I won't be able to do that without hooking up to a car. Body integration unit, that's the body control module is what they call it. In there on a real live car, you should be able to get into some setup functions where you can change a few parameters inside, like a programming type deal. AC, combi meter, the usual stuff and everything else, but a couple different things. So if we go to our SureTrack, just do premium. And we can see our top 10 list. So based on 40,000 repairs, pads and rotors, very common. Battery, tire pressure monitor, wheel stud. That seems kind of high, but I suppose they're easy to break. Over here, coolant bypass valve again. So this is a new coolant bypass valve position sensor, and that's Ranger Performance. And then we have misfire, cat code, knock sensor, all very common on a Subaru, evap as well. So the coolant bypass valve, that's interesting. It kind of stands out to me. So that's 1 and 3. And then if we look at the top lookup, so these are the top things that people have searched for, is the first two. And then there's another one that's 26A6, which should be related to those other two. So looks like a fair amount of problems with those bypass valves, huh? 48, 38 problem. Engine doesn't start, TPMS light on. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. All right, let's go to our Outback, number 2. And that's going to be the same deal in Scanner since they're all fairly similar for many, many years. They keep the platforms pretty much the same. So the biggest things that are going to change is probably on the ADAS, I would think, just because it may have more radar sensors or other sensors instead of just the eyesight. That might be one of the differences between the models. But I mean, by and large, they use pretty much the same engines and transmissions. So it's going to be pretty much the same thing going on with those. Now, this is a 2017 Outback. That's been around a bit longer. And in this case, 341,000 repairs. Pads and rotors again, battery, all the pretty common stuff. These C codes are going to be related to that ABS module thing that we talked about. So if we go in here and OEM testing, so that is electrical control module. It judges the ABS module with that. So it's the VDC CM, so the VDC control module and hydraulic unit. So that'd be the analog brake module, powers and grounds and stuff. That's what it's checking for that. So that's apparently a bit of an issue with those 17-ish era Outbacks. Second code, I believe, is also related. See, yes, speed abnormal in that one. Detected when transmitter normal signals received at a vehicle speed of less than 4 miles an hour. Or motor malfunction, I guess, would be the other one. So that is with the steering wheel, power steering. And then evap, lean code, oxygen sensor, misfires, a lot of the very similar stuff that you'd be used to for many vehicles, misfires and evap codes and stuff. That's our Outback. And let's go into our Crosstrek, which is the youngest one. Just pick a base on that one. And we can see pads, rotors, wheel hubs, very similar, 49,000 repairs on a, what, 3-year-old car. Oxygen sensor heater, crank position. So those are like cam and crank position, timing over advance. So that's the variable valve timing. A lot of times that has to do with like low oil pressure, evap, cam position, slow response. This is also a 2-liter engine instead of the 2.5, so it's going to be a little bit different. What's this B code here? Pull up. So that is damaging a coil due to the electric current on the speaker coil. So that's actually a code for a speaker, which is kind of interesting. And that's number 1. So I don't know if they had some major issues or something with this stereo system, because it's 41 occurrences. I mean, comparatively speaking, it's out of 49,000 repairs. That's not a lot, but it is the number 1 code overall that's been found on those cars. So that's kind of interesting as well, that would be there. So it's kind of some interesting stuff. Not a lot that really jumps out, so to say, other than maybe that speaker. I wonder if that one's related to the 41 and the 47. Let's find out. Doesn't take more than a click to get in there. Looks like we are operating a little slow today, but CAN communication. So that is on the, just in general, like audio unit. There we go. So radio problems on this, radio problems. All right. So that is pretty much my time. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about next time. And next time, get down here. Next time is going to be all the way in January, middle of January, because we got a bunch of holidays coming up right now. So I'm recording this, pretty quick. Recording this a little bit ahead of Christmas. So I will be traveling over the holidays and whatnot. Plus, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve are Tuesdays this year, so we won't be doing live streams on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. And then we'll be replaying this one on the 7th. So then on the 14th, we'll be all brand new, brand spanking new, starting the year off middle of January with light duty diesel diagnostics. So we're going to talk about, your F-350s, 250s, Sprinter vans, things of that nature. We're not talking big rigs. We're talking like, 1 tons, that sort of thing. So join me when we're back, 6 and 9 Eastern. If you want to join on Zoom, just go to snapon.com/OT to register there. Otherwise, the 6 p.m. class goes to my YouTube channel, so youtube.com/SnapOnDiagnostics. And then the 9 p.m. class goes to our Facebook page, so it's facebook.com/SnapOnJason. All one word, no dash in the Snap-on. And if you want to see any of the other topics in this series, we have 101. This is class 102 available. They're all about half hour, 40 minutes long, anywhere from ADOS to EVAP and everything in between. So you can check them all out. If you scan that QR code, it'll actually bring you to the YouTube channel and subscribe you automatically. So if you're not subscribed, please do so. It really helps with the algorithm when you go in and you're subscribed and that sort of thing. Also, do we have your email address? If we don't have your email address, you may be missing out on some really good information. Tech focus articles, sure track blogs, quick tips, things of that nature, new product releases. They send out my training schedule periodically. So if you're not getting those in your email, more than likely you don't have it. So if you can scan that QR code, that'll bring you to another page where you can type in your particulars. and you'll start getting this valuable information. Things like, in this example, how to diagnose a stretch timing chain, some tips on that, right? So that could be useful. All right, time for questions. And as I said earlier, this is a pre-recorded session. So if you do have a question and you're on Zoom, just reply to the registration email. If you're on YouTube, just leave a comment. And if you're on Facebook, just leave a comment and I'll get to those when I return. Also wanted to make sure I mention my buddy Keith, who also does free diagnostic training. He does it on Scan Tools specific. So on Wednesday is on Zeus and Zeus Plus, and on Thursday is on Apollo and Triton Tools. 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, 4:30 Pacific. There's one class in each of those nights. Zoom only is designed to have the tool in front of you, and he walks you through it on the screen. So it's snapon.com/OT to register for that. It is a very thorough class. Keith's been with us for a very long time. So if you want to learn a little bit more about your scan tool, that's the way to go. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with me. Hopefully you learned a few little things about the weird things that Subaru does, and I barely even scratched the surface with them. So hopefully you'll join me next time for light duty diesel diagnostics. And with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. If you're watching this before Christmas and New Year's, have some happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2025. Have a good night and take care.